if you ever like wanted to look at any sacred text, right? Like say somebody said, the ancient Egyptians said this, that, and the third. You can actually go to the ancient Egyptian and find the coffin text, the pyramid text. You can
Hmm.
find all
I like
the
to find the Thule papyrus. That's about like a UFO claim in
and
Egypt.
all
I
and all
wonder if they have that.
like I said, you don't have to spend hours reading if you don't
You
want
can,
to.
yeah, Control F.
That's all you gotta
That's
do.
clever.
If
Yeah.
somebody brings something up, be like, hey, let me look this up real quick and see what it says. And that's how I be finding it. Like I don't
Hmm.
necessarily remember everything. I just be like, oh wait, let me just look it up right here real quick because I know how to do
The
the control F.
circles. Remember you mentioned about the circles, concentric circles. Like that is a little confusing because it sounds almost like he's describing two things. He's describing like a harbor maybe or a city, and then he in the next paragraph he scales up, and like that's what gets people confused. Like first he's very narrowly focused on descriptions, and then scales up to describe the larger kingdom, I guess. So that I think that confuses a lot of people.
No, but that's why
Uh-oh.
that's why I always say, I don't know what is actually true. All I know is where to go for the actual first recorded, respected part of
Mhm.
history. And then I just leave it
Okay.
at that. And that's why I say I hear so many theories, and I know so many theories because I understand what everybody's coming from because they give me a piece of the information that I already know. But at the bare minimum, I know what exactly it says about Atlantis, and it's so easy to look it up because you can get on your phone.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah,
always
I've
tell.
read it, but I haven't memorized it.
No, I don't
Yeah.
remember it. That's all I need to remember is where to find it at. You don't
Mhm.
even. I mean, come on, think about it, man.
Well, I
Anybody.
mean, when people like say, "Oh, well, like if you're trying to describe it, sometimes you just like kind of make up a general description about what you're trying to talk about." But then that's why people don't really know because they're like, "Well, generally he said this." Okay, but there are some specific details that people just don't know.
Yeah,
They have to try to memorize.
yeah. Yeah, that's why I say yeah. Let me like whenever somebody says that the Sumerian said that the Anunnaki came from planet Nibiru, I always ask where does it actually say that at? Because
Yeah.
if it actually does say that that man that would stop that would solve so many people's problems right there. Because
Yeah.
guess what? That goes into exactly what we're about to talk about today.
All right. About UFOs, aliens, angels, and demons.
I mean,
So
okay, go ahead.
the question I guess I would like to address, to your audience is, there really is two hypotheses out there. And of course, the debate is, angels or aliens. There's the religious side and then there's the atheist side. And I think now we're living in an era where we can address this with actual evidence without just resorting to ancient text or, philosophical arguments because we're living in a new era where we can actually probably solve this mystery. So I'm going to start out again with the hypothesis that's really being promoted by these guys. You probably recognize these names, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, these are the big guys and girls. So far, it's really only Diana, the first woman, only speaking about this topic. There might be a few others that come out, but I don't really know of any other. Of course, there's Jacques Vallée, and he's the one that they didn't start out like saying extraterrestrial or extra or no extra dimensional. They did think there might be a connection of extraterrestrial, but then they started changing their tone when this man came out. Louis Elizondo in the CIA is the guy that Mullen and Susan Gao and the other director of the DoD, they're the ones that probably went to him in the Pentagon, and they told him, "We're selecting you to begin the process of disclosure." And then this guy reaches out to Jacques Vallée, and he reaches out to Gary Nolan. John D'Souza, I don't think he did because he's no longer in the FBI, but he wants to present the FBI's perspective, or at least his so-called opinion. And he has a bunch of videos about that. And then Diana was reached out by Gary Nolan. So they all are kind of connected, and all kind of goes back to Louis Elizondo and Mike Mullen, I think it is, and Susan Gao, I believe, for um, in the DoD Pacific departments, I'm sure. So I think the process started under Obama's administration. So I definitely believe that this only happened because very high level people in the DoD went to Obama and said, hey, we want to begin the process of disclosure and they want to take it very slow. So it was like 2017 when this all began with the New York Times leaking, so-called leak. He's the one who went to the New York Times, but he went to journalists and then gave the intel to them, to the New York Times, and then they published it. And then that started the whole trend in the media about the conversation of UFOs and UAPs. And the question is, why did they change it from UFOs to UAPs? So these are the guys
Well,
that,
let me ask you, because
yeah.
before you start, why do you think they did it?
Why? Oh, because of mainly because the phenomenon can't
Mm-hmm.
be controlled. And they're afraid that there might be in the future, could be, 50 years in the future, that the phenomenon could do something. And I think there was a very specific event that really got the Obama administration's attention. And I'll present that in another slide. But there was definitely a very specific event recently, not in the 80s or in the 90s, relatively recently, that sparked all this. And of course, I think there is geopolitical reasons. They want to grab on the narrative before other countries do, specifically China and Russia, more than likely. And then the European Union is just like they're all over the place, so they'll just follow the US. But yeah, the US wanted to begin the lead on this process, and they want to take advantage of it, of the phenomenon itself. That, as Gary Nolan has stated, that they want to exploit the phenomenon, whether it's a bad, evil phenomenon or a good phenomenon or something in the middle or a combination of all. The government wants to exploit it, and they want to get ahead of it before any other country, in case there is something technological that they can grab out of it. But I'll kind of explain a little bit more. But it's interesting because Jacques Vallée is kind of more agnostic, but he is more spiritual. He's the first one that promoted the extra dimensional based off all his studies in European mythology and UFO case files. And then Diana Pasoka is a Catholic researcher, and she was selected to kind of look into it as kind of like a what do you call it, the Invisible College or the UAP task force, in which all these guys are part of. I'm not sure if John D'Souza though. John D'Souza might be doing his own little thing, but he's definitely revealing some stuff. But again, like you said, a lot of the stuff he says is not really a secret. It's out in the open, and you just have to look it up, do a control F on the FBI
Yeah.
search pages, and you'll find stuff. And it's
Yeah,
declassified.
they have these documents. Anybody can see them. And they always hear why
Yeah,
are they hiding this
they're
information? And
really
it's like
not.
they're
It's
not.
just they're just not telling that they're leaking it out to
Well,
the
I
public.
mean, they're not even. I mean, would you waste your time telling people to look up something that that's already being told to you by your peers that's on Twitter and everything else? Also, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
After you hear it one time, you should be like, okay, yeah, let me go look this stuff up. Maybe two times, maybe even three. But after you hear it, after four or five, if you don't look at it, it's all on you. Then you just want to be ignorant, I guess.
Yeah. So these are their books. I mainly read Jacques Vallée's. Diana Pasoka, I'm gonna probably buy hers. But I kind of already know what she's gonna talk about because I know some history on the Catholic Church, on the saints' encounters of supernatural or paranormal events. John D'Souza's I haven't got yet. I'm thinking about it. But these two are very similar in their hypothesis. Jacques Vallée is a little more interesting because he brings about mythologies and shows how there's similarities. I think and Diane's using the Catholic saints in their weird events and seeing how that fits with Jacques Vallée's and John D'Souza. So I think these are some big books I definitely recommend people because these three are in on the process of disclosure. I think they've been chosen by Louis Elizondo, who has been chosen by people within the DoD. So it's a trickle down kind of effect. This is not some whistleblower. David Grush is not a whistleblower. Okay, he's a big guy. He's definitely up there, but he's part of the process too, and he's talking to Leo Zandro, and many others as well. So we'll get into that a little more. But I guess the issue of studying this phenomenon is there's really no peer-reviewed research yet.
I was just
There's
gonna ask.
only individual researchers with books so far, but it's the beginning stage, and that's why it's relatively a new precedent. So that's why there's You can't go look it up on Harvard.
Well, do you think it's because, I mean, come on, I mean, they've been having these studies for almost hundreds of years now, or at least they've been having, I mean, we know if sightings go back at least 100 years. So, I mean,
Yeah, but there's
do,
no academic universities that are having, graduate students
yeah,
or PhDs studying this. That's
well,
the issue.
see, that's the thing is they don't have, they may not have them studying it because it's not available, but there are definitely people who come from Harvard and Oxford and so on who actually say, hey, yeah, there is possible inner dimensions and possible aliens out there. I mean, they always, publish an article of somebody who graduated from Harvard and who has a PhD who says this. I mean, why aren't they just as credible as a person that actually works for Harvard? You know what I mean? Or I mean, do
Yeah,
you think
it
they're
needs.
waiting?
Yeah, it really, like, Avi Lloyd right now is actually been selected as well as part of the UAP task force, and he, let's just say he's got some evidence that DoD has given to him directly, by a mailbox. So, and he's going to present his, basically the government is saying, hey, we're going to give you this. Gary Nolan, we're giving you this. Diana Pasoka, we're going to give you this, some of this intel, and we want you all to come up with your own books and peer review papers. And I think Gary Nolan and Avi Lloyd are going to be working together to possibly make a peer review paper. But then they need to have others analyze that material evidence. And so it just hasn't happened yet because it only started under the Obama administration, 2017, when they released the Tic Tac. And that's the beginning stages. And the government is leading the charge to get, the civilians to look into it at the academic level, not just the MUFON level. So yeah, so
Right.
this is why I bring up the interdimensional, because David Grush is giving clues. He's giving big clues, but he has to be careful because the government may not have direct proof because the phenomenon's very evasive. And he's saying, and they chose this guy because he's in the Air Force. I think he's an NSA agent or intelligence officer, and he studies physics. So I find that very interesting. They chose this guy specifically because of that background, and he's emphasizing, oh, maybe it's extraterrestrial, but then he says to a French news agency, or it could be something else coming from other dimensions as described by quantum mechanics. So he's definitely putting in that as a clue. Okay. And Joe Rogan didn't quite pick up on the clue, but David Grush is like saying, wink, wink, maybe it's not extraterrestrial in the sense that we think. And I think that's why I hear this from him, but I'm also hearing it from Gary Nolan's talks on his podcast and other news networks. He's also saying something very similar. Also, John D'Souza is very outspoken, but he's no longer in the FBI. He's writing his own personal book that is vetted by the FBI, but it's more his belief because all he has is the FBI records. He doesn't have any physical, tangible video evidence to say because that video evidence is being released to Jeremy Corbell and others from fighter pilots like what's his name, Commander Fravor, Ryan Raves, I think it is, and there's another lady that was an Air Force pilot. So they're the ones releasing, or they're the witnesses, and then the Navy or the Air Force is going to release that data to the third party, which might be Jeremy Corbell and Louis Elizondo, or to the Stars Academy, or in Dave Grush. So Dave Grush is a little higher level, I think, than Louis Elizondo. So he might have been selected possibly first before Louis Elizondo. So I'm not sure, but they haven't. I've never seen them together yet talking on publicly. So that would be interesting if in the future if they actually come together and talk. It would be interesting to hear that. But they'll probably have another congressional hearing. So I definitely think he's giving a big wink that yeah, we might not be dealing with something that's coming from a planet. So that's why his research and what they're all saying aligns with my case. So I didn't get
I
video
tell you, man,
evidence.
I always like how you always put yourself in there like that.
Well, I was in the Air Force, okay, and I did have an encounter at my parents' place and in the Air Force and a few other times. But the biggest one was definitely at my parents' place. And I reported to MUFON. I met with a MUFON investigator out of Des Moines, and we talked, and I explained it in more detail than what I actually presented on MUFON. At the time, I'm like, I'll just keep it short just so I have some kind of record to put it there. But I would definitely categorize myself as an eyewitness of the second kind, because I performed an experiment. The experiment was to see if I can summon these things. Now, because there are people saying you can summon UFOs. So once I hear that word summon, instantly that goes towards the paranormal,
Right, right,
because
right.
there's no reason an advanced alien civilization should come to random civilians when they are asked to over a period of 2 months. So the experiment was simply to get a flashlight and signal in the sky multiple times on a weekend at night and wait. Um, and I have a video explaining more in detail with the YouTuber Eseth Original. But basically, after a couple times trying, a big red orb did appear. Now, this is a recreation. I don't have the camera footage because I tried recording. It took 2 hours. Camera dies. I go back in the house, come back in the porch here at night, wait a few more minutes. Then a big gust of wind comes, and then everything went still and silent. No rustling of anything. No owls. No nothing. And then all of a sudden, this red orb, pretty big, about the size of a small car, goes right over those treetops right here and moved slowly like that until it kind of dipped down, and then the foliage blocked it, and then I think it kind of like shrunk and faded down away and disappeared. But it responded to me on the other side of the house when I was signaling a flashlight about an hour before with faint flashes of white light. And the third time, like I flashed once, I got a reply. I flashed twice, I got a reply that was a little brighter. I flashed the third time, oh, I got a really big flash. And it was very low to the house. It wasn't just something that was up in the sky that I couldn't distinguish, like, is that lightning or is that, something really low? And it responded the third time. That's when things got shit was starting to hit the fan. I'm like, okay, there's something out here. And the way you do it is you're simply, it's like praying or meditating, but you're actually physically talking out loud to yourself, by yourself, and asking it to manifest. Like saying, believing very hard, like, I know you're out there, you're hiding, give me a damn sign. And the first signs it gave was simply something that looked like the space station, a satellite. It was like white and it faded in, faded out. But then, so I checked my phone. Okay, where's the space station? Okay, space station's over South America. I shouldn't be seeing the space station. So, what other satellite could be as bright as the space station? I couldn't think of any other. So, I'm thinking, okay, something is fading in and out. And I shine my flashlight in the sky again. And I'm thinking, how can they see my flashlight from way up there? Well, that's because they're not way up there. They're very low. They're at the troposphere level or lower. They're scanning for people, I think. And it was a scary experience. I don't recommend this because you'll end up potentially with poltergeist activity. And I say that because I've been looking at other cases, and there's definitely cases of people saying you saw a UFO, a month later you start getting poltergeist
Yeah, I
activity.
remember you saying that before.
So that's why I warn people that, don't assume it to be extraterrestrial. There shouldn't be objects moving in your house unless there's a giant magnet on top of your house. Like,
Well,
things should not be teleporting. Things
I
should
think
not be moving on its own.
I think people say that it's extraterrestrial because they don't believe it's from Earth. That it came from outside of Earth's atmosphere and came here. So you think
No,
they're here? They've been here and they never
I
left.
would
It's always
quote,
been here.
yeah, I would quote Louis Alessandro. He spoke in the UK, and he definitely said that they might not necessarily be coming here. I had a chance to talk with certain officials at the Vatican, and we found some interesting archives about a Roman case, about a battle,
Mm,
and then some manifestation happening that stopped the war, and then the war continued after.
mm.
And these so-called shields in the sky. And he said that it could be another form of life, but not in the way we think as extraterrestrial. He's saying it could be from right here, but folding in from another dimension, as David Grush is
Yeah.
alluding. He's saying maybe it could be this. He doesn't want to specifically say 100% because the government still has to bear the burden of proof,
Something
and
that's
they don't
not
have.
human.
Oh, well, yeah, they're basically the hypothesis is they're spirits,
Yeah.
but they can completely be very material.
But what is
That's
a
what's
spirit? To what? Okay, well, that's a good question. What is your definition of a spirit? Because everybody will have a different idea. And then let's look it up and see. Let's compare it.
so. Yeah, basically, a spirit is something that's ethereal, a creature that has will and agency, and it does take up space,
Okay.
according to what Catholics and Muslims would argue. They describe it as jinns or angels, but there's a hierarchy within that. And so, spirits are like an aura. There's some kind of aura, but they can break the laws of nature. They can really, literally break the laws of physics and alter it or suspend them or transform it in some way. For example, at Iowa State University at the design building, anybody can look this up on the fourth floor, if you want to go there. But me and my friend, he's Muslim, I'm Catholic. He calls me up. I have a video about this. It's 30 minutes long, and I try to capture it. But basically, we saw a wooden little ball teleporting in that room, breaking the laws of physics 100%. There's no technology, but it was moving it with agency and a playful manner, sort of, but very disturbing. And it dropped the ball over my friend's head, and it was just bouncing it. One time it hit the table, dropped from the air, bounced, hit the table, bounced up, and disappeared. And we tried to capture this on video, but it was very elusive. And this is what we call the poltergeist phenomenon. And most Catholics and Muslims would agree this is some form of a demonic spirit that's playing with you. They're not all powerful though. People think
I'm
that
glad you
demons
said
are
that.
they're
So, because you used the word demonic,
yeah, you judge it by its actions, and if
let me,
it's
let me,
screwing with you,
let me see if this works. Let me see if this works. This is. Remember where you're at, because this is
sure,
going to stop your screen short too. I want to show you something. Can you see that?
not yet.
You see
Okay,
it?
spirit, yeah.
Okay, so you said demonic, right? What do you think about this part right here?
The meaning supernatural, immaterial creatures, angels, demons, and apparitions, visible, corporeal, yeah, being of an air, yeah, just like in Hebrew, they mentioned that God is like a breath, or like spirits, or the Elohim are like breath. They're like
Yeah.
air. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason they give that poetic description is because they have this ethereal, invisible nature, but they physically have the ability to get into a phone like this. And if they wanted to levitate it, they could do that. But it depends on the type of spirit. Not all spirits are powerful. Some can only push a phone, they can't levitate it, or they have to build up their power over time. And that's where, like, at a haunted house or something like that. And normally, demonic entities, they're not all powerful, as Muslims would say. These jinn need to build in their power, and they do that by feeding off the person, because the person is like the portal. There's no physical portal.
Yeah, the
It's like
vessel.
they somehow lock onto the person, and they feed off, first they feed off curiosity, and then they move into curiosity in the form of more of an addictive curiosity, and then into fear. And once you have curiosity and fear latched together, they kind of got you. And then now they can start moving bigger things. They can move heavier things. So these spirits, they're 100% ethereal aura. Like, I think there was a case in the UK. Oh, I can't remember the case, but some scientist was trying to capture something on an invisible thermal or infrared camera, and he caught some aura in a ball shape, but it was invisible, but it was very cold, and he saw it moving. And I wish I had that. I can't find the video anymore, but there was a case in the UK. There's other YouTubers have caught something like this, but that's why I say that UFOs seem to be exhibiting some of these attributes. And that's why we would call, basically, in the scientific sense, that angels and demons, or jinns and yokais in Japan, are categorized as extra dimensional in the scientific sense. Well, not really, because there's no peer review paper that says angels are extra dimensional. That's something that people are just kind of making up. David Grush is just saying, well, maybe they're extra dimensional, but we don't really know what that means. What is extra dimensional? What is interdimensional? What is hyperdimensional? What is non-dimensional? In the specific term that Dave Grush should be using is spirit. But that the problem is the government can't do that because there's separation of church and state. You can't use vocabulary that associates to any form of religion in the DoD. So they have to use other terminologies like unidentified aerial phenomenon. okay, instead of unidentified flying object. And they don't call it object anymore because it's exhibiting ethereal natures
Yeah,
based off
well,
the
because
case
a lot of
files.
times they were saying it was orbs. So,
Oh yeah, we'll show you the. I'll show you my evidence. Let's see. Let me share. Okay, so if you want to know more specifically about my case, because it's involved, I could talk the whole cases. What to say? My sister saw it. My neighbors heard the loud booms. Shit was happening, and I would never do recommend it. But if you're an atheist and if you don't believe, do the experiment.
well, what does an
Um,
atheist got to do with that, though?
because atheists don't believe it because they don't
No,
believe that you can break the laws of physics.
no. Look, I actually looked this definition up before, just to
Scientific
just.
atheists, I would say, may
Okay,
not,
so
new
you're
age
saying
spiritualists, but
different. Okay, so yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you. I
I'm
got you.
specifically like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay, imagine if I said to Neil deGrasse Tyson, I saw a wooden little balsa wood ball used for modeling teleport in front of my eyeballs, and he would say, "You mean the wind was moving it?" Like, like he wouldn't be able to comprehend that because there's a law that says you can't break the conservation of mass, and apparently that's what these UAPs are starting to show
But see, that doesn't make
attributes.
sense to me because he's
Or Michio
not.
Kaku. Even Michio Kaku would not believe that. If I said to him, I saw a wooden ball teleport, he said, well, how can that happen? That would break every laws of nature. And
Yeah,
that's,
nature that we know of.
I know, but that's where David Grush and John DeSouza and others are saying there's a new
Because
science
that's
that's
our
coming
nature.
about, but
These
it's not,
if they're extraterrestrial demons, angels, or whatever you want to call them, that of course that they're not of our nature, and we're not of their nature, so they're going to have
but
different things.
when you say extraterrestrial, though, you are invoking something that is like that has a body. It's carbon. It has water. It needs to
no, not
eat.
me.
It needs
No,
to
I go. I could
reproduce.
tell you exactly what I go because I always
Because
go.
that's what people think when you say extraterrestrial. They
No,
think
I
a
always go
biological being
to.
from another
I
planet.
always go to etymology. I always tell you that.
Well, I'm saying the perception is. So you might believe in a little different way, but the scientists are going to say
No, okay,
no
so I get what
way.
you're saying. So the
Like
general
yeah,
consensus of the
yeah.
idea of an extraterrestrial, they have a body is. But see,
Like this
that
guy right
doesn't
here
make
in
sense
this
to me
photo.
either
That's the.
because one of my favorite
It normally invokes something that's dependent on a planet for energy.
okay,
That's what it normally denotes.
so Travis Walton is one of my favorite. It
Yeah,
is not my favorite, but is one of my favorite.
he's changed his position, all right. I think
He
in a
has.
sense, I think he has in the latest one documentary I posted on my one of my latest videos in the UK. And he's starting to think these things are far more ethereal in nature and not extraterrestrial. And I
So where
think it
does
was
he
John
think he
D'Souza
went
that brought
then?
that up. What?
What does he say where he went then? From what you remember.
He said he felt abducted, like so he actually had a physical experience, like something
Okay, so
really
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. So yeah,
But John D'Souza is saying he's looking at other case files. He's saying I'm not sure if they're really physically abducting him, but going into his brain and altering the
yeah.
neurons.
Now, see, that's what I was going to say. I was going to go back to this because you said you grew up Catholic in religion. If you look at everything that happened in religion, it's always through a vision. Always, always.
No, no, not a physical vision. Like they physically saw stuff, not something
Okay,
in their brain.
who?
Like,
Okay, give me one that physically saw something.
well, the whole
Because I
story
can
of
tell you,
Jesus, but I don't want to get into that.
I can tell you that Jacob, when he seen the ladder, it was when he was in a sleeping meditative state.
Okay, well,
But
maybe in that case, but for all we know, that story is
Mo-
Egyptian. Okay, that
Moses,
goes really far back in time.
right? But
What's
that's
the
what I'm saying.
example of the Thule papyrus in Egypt? Let's not even look at the Bible. Okay, there's other stories. We don't have to just look at the Bible, and this is why Protestants don't like that. But you got to look at other cultures. Okay,
Yeah,
so
theirs is
there's
through visions also.
no in the Thule papyrus. It sounds like the scribe in the Egyptian papyrus is describing something very external, something they visibly saw multiple people over a period of time. There's a case in Japan.
Oh, you talking about
The
like
Utsu.
for like a like an orb in the encounter and stuff like that?
Yeah,
No,
there
no,
was
I'm
a yeah
talking
some kind
about
of
whenever individuals talk to a god, it was always through a vision of some sort.
well Yeah,
or when it was talking to an angel.
I don't know if they're physically talking to God. They're
Well,
they're
that's what I'm
mentally
saying.
meditating.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's what I'm saying through it. That's what I call a vision, because if you look up the etymology vision is literally, look here, I'll bring it up, man. I like to come with facts. Oh no, I'm gonna show you. You know I always like to come with
But
facts.
what are you implying? Are you implying a vision it's just in their brain? There's nothing physically external, or are
Well,
you
it
saying there's
says,
something
well,
external?
right here it says something seen in the imagination or in the
Oh, okay.
supernatural,
Well, yeah,
or in the
mine is not
super.
imaginal. My
Yeah,
case was not imagination because
no,
my
no, no,
sister
no.
saw
That's
it,
why, but
and
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. You didn't.
there's we have to distinguish. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that's what no, but that's what I'm saying. Like here, I'll even bring it up, so because we still you didn't bring your things up, but look, right there it says it right there, and the reason why I bring that up is because you talked about religion, like I said, but in religion when the like when who was it, Ezekiel, when he seen the what some people describe as the will, he was in a meditative state also, which some
Yeah,
people
we don't know
consider.
who wrote Ezekiel, and I think that story is very old.
No, but
But there, it's what's interesting is you have to be careful because just like in ancient writings, they mix poetry with
mm-hmm.
testimony,
Yeah,
and we don't know who wrote Ezekiel.
yeah,
Okay, it could
yeah,
have been some Egyptian scribe 3000 BC for all we know.
yeah.
Because now that I argue that the Garden of Eden truly probably was the inspiration, Egypt was truly the inspiration for that. It really changes how we view the Bible. We don't know these original authors, especially the Old Testament. The New Testament, not that old. It's only 2,000 years old or so. So Old
Okay.
Testament, 3000 BC potentially. It's hard. Yeah, I wouldn't go by that, but I always say that you don't need to look to the Bible. There are other stories out there and other religions and other secular kind of reports, like the Roman shield report that Louis Alessandro points out in one of his talks when he presented that in the UK. I think there's some videos about it too. Other YouTubers have talked about that case, and it was a weird event that Roman soldiers on different there was a battle, I guess, and they saw something that manifested physically and it stopped the battle and shocked everybody. But let me move on. So yeah, as I mentioned, like this idea of the forbidden fruit, people think it's just something in the Bible. It'll happen one time and that's it. No, we're still eating from that fruit, and I'm gonna have to give a little, put my feminist voice on here. I'm not feminist, but in the Bible they always emphasize, oh, Eve ate from the fruit and it caused all the problems. Basically, I don't think so, because when I study paranormal stuff, when I watch these documentaries, it's always men that are involved in this stuff. Hardly women don't like this stuff. They want to feel safe. And in ancient times, it was men who were desiring power. So it was men eating from the fruit of power. And if they saw something supernatural, they thought they were special, and they wanted to conjure it up even more and literally bring the god down, literally in some sense, so with some kind of manifestation to persuade the populace to worship it. And that's why Egypt has so many gods. Is that I think these gods just aren't symbolic to nature; they are using nature to symbolically try to describe the real gods that we now call UAPs, or angels and demons. And so it was in the Garden of Eden that this, I think, happened because these entities target humans. Okay, they're not in the oceans, they're not in Antarctica, they go where the people are. And Egypt was very populated, relatively in the ancient times, to other regions in the Middle East because of the Garden Oasis. So yeah, they were flocking to Egypt, screwing with people, and that's why Egypt was obsessed with death, rebirth, and your name, and magic and all that stuff. So they were eating from that fruit. But it's not just Egypt. It was like almost every ancient culture committed human sacrifice and all that. But that's why to this day we are eating that in some sense. And then what do we mean by that? Well, it's basically anything that we perceive that gives us power. And every time I go on these Twitter spaces or X spaces, you always hear it's about, oh, they're going to give us technology, they're hiding the advanced, free energy and all that. It's all about power to these men. When they don't want to believe in the supernatural stuff, they want to ignore that. And these entities know we desire power, and they take advantage of that. And even our government, I would say our government is Adam, who's really the one that ate the fruit, and Eve is the private sector. and they're both eating from that fruit. And Avi Lloyd has been given samples by the DoD, and the DoD is saying, "Hey, take this, research it. We're not saying anything else. You study it and give us a conclusion." And then Gary Nolan has also received samples. Jacques Vallée has also received samples, and all it is some kind of metallic alloy that's been dropped, because the nature of the phenomenon is showing attributes that fit to like the character Alita Battle Angel in the James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez film, where she can morph her body, just like Terminator or Venom. That's what we're observing in these videos. So Avi Lloyd is definitely now part of that disclosure process. So I would keep an eye on him. He's it's strange because there's a case that brought up. He said they went to Papua New Guinea, dug up something that was a meteor. Like, why would, if you're looking for meteor samples, you don't need to go to the bottom of the ocean to find meteor samples. But for some reason, they chose that specific location, not him, the Navy. So the Navy went to him, and his team got together to look at the samples. And there's something weird about that case, and I would keep an eye on that in the future. I find that awfully suspicious because you can go out in Arizona desert and find meteorites. You don't need to go in the ocean. But for some reason, they went to this specific case, and it'll be probably 10 years from now we'll hear about it. So I would keep an eye on that.
And let me ask you something real quick before you scroll back up.
Yeah.
Yo, those two apples right there, is that supposed to be an alien in the middle?
Well, most people don't realize, but when Steve Jobs, they chose the apple initially as a symbol of Newton, the apple falling down. But then they noticed something, and I think the later artists wanted to change it into, instead of multiple colors, they wanted to change it into one color. Yeah, I think it was white, black. And they noticed that if you do the mirror image of it, and you look at the negative space, you see something that looks like an alien or something demonic looking back at you. And I find that very interesting. They did have the Superman character too. The S on Superman, that's a rattlesnake, because original people who came up with the design after 1945, they changed it into a snake. Originally, it was an S, and then they added a loop with a little I, and they changed it to a rattlesnake. Not a cobra. I was surprised. Rattlesnake kind of fit a little better, probably. So I find that interesting. So yeah, I think these, people play with symbolisms and all that. And the idea is that the Apple phone or any computer is a symbol of power and knowledge. Knowledge is power. And these entities are trying to give us knowledge that might be forbidden, or it may not be bad or good. It's more like they know that we'll turn it into something bad eventually. Just like in the phrase in Alita Battle Angel, the Dr. Ito character, he's like, she gets this new berserker body, which berserker is a Native American kind of phrase for someone who dressed up as a bear suit, furs. So he's saying that it's not good or bad. That part is up to you. But the demons know that, governments love power, so they can gain some upper geopolitical advantage. And I don't think it's gonna be good in the long run. We'll see. Time will tell. Might be good, might be bad. It depends on us. So do you have any other questions on that?
Oh no. That was
Here's the actual evidence. So this is what people need to start using their logical mind here. Okay. Jeremy Corbell released stuff. Okay. He is being used as a third party by the DoD. Okay. They're releasing real high quality photos for the first time. Okay. This was by Ryan Graves. I think this was his airplane. And he took his phone, a regular phone, to snap it. And this is showing some blobular, non-symmetric kind of metallic orb substance. And this one is from an airplane. This was by a civilian airliner. That guy, a pilot, uploaded and got the History Channel. I forgot the name of the guy. And then this one was released by the DoD. I think this one was in Iraq, I believe. And this one was released at Congress. This was also another orb. So when they mentioned about 47% are definitely orbs, but the hypothesis is all these objects, they have the ability to fuse together and change form, but they're not intrinsically metal.
Like mercury.
They're like, I find that interesting that you brought that up, because the ancients were kind of obsessed with mercury. I wonder why. And even the story of Ezekiel, there's a poetic description of metal. Metal is very something that symbolizes power, because it turns into weapons. You can mold it and change its shape. And I think these entities are intentionally manifesting in this way, or somehow it's like their default state, but it's not their true intrinsic form. When they take on a material form, they tend to default into this metallic state, and they can somehow heat this metal up and change it and make it into a plasma, and that's where we see these lights. And sometimes they can be invisible. They can cool themselves down, and you don't see the light at all. It's just completely more of like a faded bronze or gray color like this. So these photos are alluding to something that can morph.
So you don't think it's something inside them? Is
There's
that
nothing inside them.
is
Oh, David
something?
Grush just said that on Joe Rogan. He said we found out there's not in the 1933 case in Italy. Again, they chose Italy for a reason. They could have chose other case files, but they specifically chose Italy to wink, wink. What's in Italy? The Vatican, head of the Catholic Church. They chose that case very specifically, and they're alluding that yes, David Grush is saying we did not determine that was anything piloting these things. And Ryan Graves, the pilot, says these things can shoot so fast it makes no sense there would be anything biological. Now, it could bring up the hypothesis they're probes, but there's evidence like the Aqua de Puerto Rico case where the object can split. Okay, and it was an orb. It was caught on radar and the radar detected that, according to the reporters, that the one of the orbs was not as dense as the other orb. It was forming in its density, and it went through water like it was nothing. It didn't produce like a wave or anything. It was something. It was more ethereal, like you could go through it sort of, but it can change its density. So these
Something
things
like
can be
remember Terminator? Remember
yeah, that's why I
the
bring up,
second
well,
one?
my favorite movie of Cameron's is, well, I guess it's Cameron's, is Alita Battle Angel, which was inspired by Terminator. Yeah, Terminator can morph. That's the good description. Yeah, Alita and Terminator are one of the best characters to try to describe the nature and ability of these entities. And if that's the case, that they have molten metallic morphing abilities, then they're not intrinsically extraterrestrial. Keep in mind, 99.9% of the time, they're in the air. So can we truly call it terrestrial? So that's why David Grush is alluding to that extra dimensional hypothesis. He doesn't want to say it out loud, right? Because that's very hard to prove. They're going to have to gather a lot more data. They basically want the civilians to come up with that hypothesis, and then the government will say, yes, we also concur with the civilians. But they're trying to get the civilian academic institutions to say, you figure it out. We'll give you clues, but you come up with a statement. We don't want to say it. So I
So
think that, yeah.
I was going to ask you. What is your ideas about the ones where people say that there were people that there were you know uh something inside them, like the UFOs that have you know aliens
Yes.
inside them.
Yes. Again, if they have morphing abilities and they're truly interdimensional, we're talking about a level where they can really conjure up some freaky shit. And I'll get to that. It's disturbing even for average Christian or Muslim. It's like, well, okay, we believe that, but we don't like believe. Like until you
No,
witness it,
I'm I'm
it's shocking. Yeah, because again, I'll bring up.
I'm I'm,
Okay,
I'm
here's
glad you
some.
said that, because before you go to this slide, let me grab my son real quick and
Yeah.
give him something. I'm really glad you brought that
Oh,
up.
okay. All right. So this is an interesting slide. This medal right here was given to Jacques Vallée by the U.S. Army, and these right here were given also by to Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée, and then Gary Nolan also has these samples. And Avi Lloyd is finding these unusual metals too, but in the ocean, which is strange. So what's interesting about this, it's showing a layered metal system, like fragment. And I think Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan are stating that this looks like it's been reconfigured in a way that is abnormal, because they're trying to find if it's matching up to certain alloys that are found in space. And I think Avi Lloyd is alluding that there are certain alloys they found, which I think they're using the cover of It's a Meteor as sort of to soften the disclosure. But I don't think whatever Avi Lloyd has is necessary from a meteor. I think it's from a UFO case file that we don't know of yet that happened in Papua New Guinea off the coast, and the Navy has gathered the material. and Oviloid. They want Oviloid to see if there's some relation between what Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée has. So, and I bet there might be some other scientists also analyzing these materials. And I think that this is what the government means. I'm sorry, what David Grush is saying about we have certain technologies. He's saying this. He's saying metal fragments, not a spaceship, okay? Not a probe, nothing that's advanced, no teleportation device. It's just these UAPs are pooping out metal, basically. They're like turds in the wind, but they're metal. And they're dropping this
So
stuff. Yeah, so yeah, it sounds like that what Gary Nolan is implying, and whenever every time I hear him talk, he's talking a lot. So he's saying things like they're giving us gifts. Like these UAPs are intentionally dropping stuff. And I think the government is seizing, like they'll leave little traces of metal. Like there's a case in Brazil, I think, or Venezuela, that Gary Nolan spoke about, and the military that down there went to grab whatever evidence, and they found some fragments, some remnants of these fragmented metals. And they're like, okay. And they gave it to Gary, and Gary's like analyzing it. He's like, okay, the isotope ratio is a little unusual. Why this can only be produced in a lab? Why is it being found here? And they're finding other cases, I think, in other countries, possibly in Italy. And they're showing these metals have these layering effects, and they might be relating to the metal spheres that have been also found in some crop circles in the 1980s and the early 2000s. That's an interesting case. There's a good documentary that was posted years ago on UFO TV. A real scientist lady went out there to analyze it, and she said she's finding unusual metals in the crops that seem to be more authentic and more complex in their design than the ones that just been pushed down by people. So she's saying that the plants in those are somehow being microwaved and heated up and bended down gently, or it's not being crunched by something physical. It's being warped, like Avatar: Last Airbender kind of thing, but like the water bender or something is bending it through some kind of microwave process. That's the way she described it. And it would be interesting to know if they ever bring the crop circles up, because I know those had cases of metal in them, and these UAPs seem to have that nature. But then I bring up this case. So this is MUFON case 73076 in Marquette, Michigan. And I found this, other YouTubers reported this years ago. I think it was like 2000, let's see, maybe 2015 or 17. And this person was a photographer, and he said that he saw something zipping by after he was taking photos, but he didn't think he caught anything on the photos until he posted this. And then someone on the Facebook page said, "Hey, don't you know there's a UFO in your photo?" And the guy didn't realize it because he only saw the UFOs after he was done taking his photos, apparently, this photographer. And I'm like, okay, I've been here before. And do you see the UFO
yeah, it's like
right
right
there?
into the corner. Yeah, yeah, like at the edge. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a zoomed in one. So again, it has that saucer shape, but it makes me think that this thing is exactly the same as these objects. But these objects might have the ability to fuse together and warp their shape
Well,
into something that appears saucer-like.
well, the one
But the,
if you go all the way back up, the one on the left has looks like a fin on the left side. Yeah, look. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, this one is showing these blobular things that are protruding
yeah,
out,
yeah, they're
which
like
that's what people are indicating, that these things have the ability to fuse together. And when they're more in a stable state, they have this perfect spherical metallic state. In other cases, the metal seems to be warping in its kind of like a dodecahedron kind of shape, or something a little more polygonal. Um, and then that's why I bring up, like, I feel like there's definitely a connection. Now, this is not a case that's been really on the news too much, but it's a pretty important one, I think, because when I looked at it, I'm looking for like fraying from these pixelizations, where if you see a purple hue around it, and when you really do zoom in, you do see that transition, and that indicates it's definitely an external object that's in the photo. It's not something that's been photoshopped, because you would see more crisp cut if it was photoshopped. Because most people just, they use the magnetic tool and they cut it out and place it in and blend it.
yeah.
But in this one, you see that frizzling around the
Yeah.
pixels here and the same around the trees, which indicates that when the guy is taking the picture, he's holding it very still, probably has a tripod, but when you press with the finger, you're still making a slight movement on the lens, on the camera, a slight vibration, and you'll still see those kind of, the pixels can't quite get it perfect. So that's why you see that fizzling around the edges of things. So that indicates to me, someone who knows how to use Photoshop, that this is probably not photoshopped.
Yeah, I actually
Um,
can zoom in more on my computer just touching the screen.
yeah. So this is a, what's interesting is there's been other cases like this where these UAPs will intentionally get into people's photos. Like they want to be seen, but they know that this is just an average civilian. You can't, oh, you just can't trust it because there's other people that make fake stuff. So how do you distinguish what's fake and what's not? Well, that's why you need professional videographers or, FBI agents to analyze these photos. And that's what's going on, I think, at the high levels of the FBI or the CIA, is they're looking for these really nice photos and weird cases where, the person, this is a photographer guy. I checked his Facebook and I can't remember his name because it was this like years ago, but it is on my channel that I reported it, and he didn't indicate anything about like obsessions with UFOs. Like in most cases, like most of these videos I'm finding, they're not people that are obsessed with UFOs, unless they're like a big YouTuber. Then I'm a little more skeptical, like even my own channel, because I don't have I don't have personal evidence of my case, so I'm not going to bother, trying to promote that in some sense. But there are people who make a YouTube channel and automatically they'll just post a video. It's like, hey, I caught a UFO, and they don't care to make any other
Yeah,
new videos. And
yeah.
they're like what I call virgin YouTubers. And just all of a sudden they just posted something and they're like, hey, I saw something strange. And that is what I think the
Well,
CIA is trying to look for.
maybe that's the only one that they could share then.
Yeah, it's the only thing they got, or the UAP only allowed them to capture, because these things are intelligent. They know when you have a camera. I try to capture on video. After 2 hours, it decides to wait till my battery dies, and then it appears the red orb. So I'm like, okay, now you're just playing. Okay, it's like it would make me angry because I waited long, and I mean I spent a month on weekends trying to summon this thing. It did eventually work, but these entities, they know you're trying to get them on video, and they get to choose when they go on video. They'll choose you. They don't really just, they'll target certain individuals. It's not just going to the military. That's why the CIA is looking at probably civilian videos and the FBI.
You know,
um
I just thought of something when you was talking about the metal transforming and
mhm.
being able to change shape and stuff like that. Isn't that the same thing that described that at Roswell, the type of metal that was at Roswell?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, the so-called foil.
Yeah.
I think, I think that photo was not original. There's the
Yeah.
lady, one of the ladies in one of the documentaries talk about Roswell, that yeah, something happened, but again, it's not like something physically crashed. It's more like they heard something, like the mystery boom phenomenon, which is a whole other story I
Mm.
won't get into. Um, but something happened, and then the military people reported it, and then the military decided to come out after people started reporting it. Just like the Clintonville, Wisconsin mystery booms, they only came out
Yeah, because they didn't
after
know. They didn't know.
civilians reported it.
Yeah, they
So
didn't
yeah,
know.
there's yeah, these things are definitely playing with us and they're testing us, it seems like. And that's why this is the case. Okay, now there are good documentaries and there are bad documentaries. This is a bad documentary. The people here are trying to show evidence, looking at blurry shit. You can't basically, because you see that face that looks like a demon in the woods. Like, that's not clear evidence, and it's terrible. They have a good strong argument, but they don't have anything to back it up until 2011. Okay, this event is what caused the Obama administration to really start thinking about UAPs. Okay, 4 different cameras caught this. Dozens of people saw it. It reached CNN and Fox News. Videos got a little bit doctored by the time it reached CNN and Fox
Yeah,
News,
of
but they were
course.
there, and this got up to the History Channel, and this thing, Fox News even report the red orbs that manifested above it when the video shot up. At the time, 2011, it's just a cell phone camera, but still, this thing was warping. When you look at the original footage on my channel, not my original footage, someone in Jerusalem over the Dome of the Rock, it was warping in its shape. So that tells me that these are not intrinsically solid, and that's why they changed it from
Mhm.
UFO to UAP to
Yeah,
indicate and wink to the scientific community this might not be intrinsically solid.
yeah,
And there's that stigma that UFO equals spaceships and extraterrestrials.
yeah.
The
That's what.
evidence is not
Yeah,
leading towards that.
yeah. That's what I was saying. Well, I mean, some of it does. I mean, depending on what you consider evidence. But yeah, that's what I was saying. Like I think UAP fits the entire uh all the groups together, whether it's extraterrestrial aliens from a different planet, or whether it's on ground in on earth somehow, interdimension, whatever you want to call it. I think that plays a part because, like you talked about spirits earlier, that's more of a spiritual religion type thing. So yeah, see,
But
yeah.
that's what this whole phenomenon is store the evidence is leaning towards that. When I start hearing stories about people saw a UFO in a national park, and then they saw a cryptid Bigfoot that was shadowy and making loud noises. I'm like, why are they speaking Japanese? It's Bigfoot. It wasn't in Japanese, but it sounded like a Japanese guy. In this documentary, they present audio evidence. It was disturbing. I presented one of my videos. It was really freaky, and they said they saw strange kind of saber-like lights, orbs in the sky when they saw these cryptids. So the correlation is, are these UAPs conjuring up avatar vessels? And that's a very disturbing reality to people. And this is why this is like majestic level stuff. And if this is the case, then these are not aliens. They're taking avatar forms to screw with us. And people have to be careful. Now,
That sound
this
like
happened over
Hinduism.
Jerusalem. I'm sorry.
I said that sound like Hinduism.
Yeah, well, the Hindus, real Hindus, really do believe in spirits. They don't believe in spaceships and aliens. They want in the ancient times, they 100% believed in demons and angels or different types of gods that are in the middle. And these in Islam they call them jinn. And so if Muslims were to see this, they would say that is probably a jinn or an angel, because it can move at the speed of light. In Islam, they emphasize that jinn can move at the speed of light. This thing shot up really fast, and they can change their shape, and they can teleport objects. They can just break the laws of physics. So real alien civilizations, they might be advanced, but there's fundamental laws of physics that you cannot break unless you tamper in the realm of the supernatural. And the logic here, for example, here's another evidence. So this was presented on another documentary, Discovery Channel hosted in India. But this lady, Yasmin, she reported and captured this video. You can check out this whole documentary. This of the only thing important in this documentary is her case, because they actually present real video evidence. This object is morphing, and it's also showing the fridging in the photo, where that purple hue outline tells me exactly that this is not Photoshop. It's not AI generated. It's definitely something that's refracting due to the camera not being very good, and being this object is kind of warping and bending. And she says she saw this thing warping and bending in her camera, and it was not a balloon or anything like that. And in this, so she went to eventually she reported her case to move on, and then got onto this documentary. And she's pretty adamant that these things have the ability to morph, split, expand, shrink, fuse, make multiple colors. They have a metallic state, but they can turn from a liquid to a solid, and they can dissolve or like bleed into our reality, our dimension. And they can move at the speed of sound or the speed of light, but they can produce, sometimes they'll produce no sound when they're invisible, but they don't produce any sound when they move. But when they do produce sound, like the cases I found with Linda Moulton Howe, were the mystery booms and these loud jet roaring noises over people's houses with a flash of white light. And there is video evidence of this on my channel, about the whole USN phenomenon, which I think we'll hear in later in a decade or two. It'll be interesting to know if David Grush alludes to any noises. I'd love to hear that. And that's why we have to ask the question, the religious question that every religion has believed, that gods have the ability to take on avatar bodies, or what we call cryptids. And they can call, and within those cryptid cases, there's evidence and testimonial claims of poltergeist activity. If that's the case, then we cannot say it's extraterrestrial anymore, but interdimensional. that's the conclusion, that it's not a technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't want to believe. It's very
It's
disturbing
natural.
and
It's something
disappointing.
that it's
It's sort
natural.
of, it's natural, yeah. Like to them, it's natural. To us, it's supernatural because it is breaking laws of physics. Things should not be teleporting. Things should not be moving at the speed of light with no sonic boom. Things like that. And they should not be
It,
targeting random individuals like this guy. This lady and me. So yeah, we have to be aware of other cases. And once you look into all these other cases, a theory does come about, and that's what David Grush is alluding to. So here's more evidence. This gets
the
really deep
yin
now.
and yang, the yin and yang.
So, okay, this is another case by a man claiming he saw extraterrestrials in his house. He has video evidence. I forgot the name of the documentary. I should have probably posted it here. It's on my main UFO videos that I talked about in parts 1 to 4. And this is what they call shadow beings that Heidi speaks about on UFO Twitter.
The hat man.
She's Yeah, it's basically this is their default form when they try to manifest in your house. But when they're outside your house in the woods, there seems to be some kind of law protecting us and preventing them from conjuring up a biologic, as David Grush alludes to. But they're not intrinsically biological. This is a demon, and this could be an angel. This is a photo. Here, let me actually show you just a minute. So I have the original photo. Let me find it. I should have brought it up here sooner.
You got a mute button on that microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell.
Okay. Oh, I don't need it here. Crap. Uh-oh. Well, what happened to it? Didn't teleport away, did it? I know it's in here. Bro. Oh.